Robinson, who's in the slot. Look in that direction on a slant. Huge hit. Ball picked off. The Volunteers of the Carib make an interception. Jawan Mitchell. They call him Juju.
Discrepancy. Schuster, they were going to take a shot, but he's hit by Nelson. And Nebraska has picked up the football. Their first takeaway of the game.
Wells way down the field. It is into coverage. It is intercepted. It is over. Lamarian James has sealed the victory for Old Dominion. And fittingly, it comes on a takeaway.
Welcome to Devy IDP Grind, episode number 75. I am your host, Justice. Today, it's just me flying solo. Hollywood's had some personal things come up, so he's not going to be available for the show today or for the show tomorrow. So you'll just get to spend some time with me. Today's episode, we're going to cover the IDP conference preview for the FBS Independence, the American Athletic Conference, and Conference USA, which some of those folks actually played yesterday. And so it's kind of a great segue to the news and notes, and that's college football's back. We had, like 5 or 6 week 0 games yesterday. Hopefully you had opportunity to watch a few of those. I didn't get to watch too many. I watched the Navy Notre Dame game and a little bit of the Vanderbilt Hawaii game, and saw very, very little of the Jacksonville State UTEP game. But it was great that football is back, and next week, starting Thursday, this coming week, goes full swing. All the teams will be playing. Your leagues will start, and just a great time of the year. With that, we'll get to the news and notes. So, it seems like we talk about this every show, and that's kind of realignment. The next kind of domino to fall is what's going to happen with those 4 remaining Pac-12 schools, being Stanford, California, Oregon State, and Washington State. And I've seen several reports since our last episode talking specifically about Stanford and Cal. There have been reports that Stanford, Cal, and SMU are being looked at by the ACC, and that they may be even willing to join the ACC basically for free or at a reduced share for several years to kind of help maybe get into conference to begin with. But there's also been reports about Stanford and Cal, joining maybe the Big 12 or some other conference. So I've said it before, I'll say it again. This conference realignment stuff, to me, just from a football perspective, it makes sense. And I think the smart thing to do would have been to make these things football only. Just because it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me that you're going to send, the golf team or the volleyball team or the men's soccer team from Los Angeles to State College, Pennsylvania during the week for a game. The football team, I have no doubt they're going to be on a chartered flight. These other, what I would call non-revenue sports, the chances of them being on a charter flight probably aren't that great, I wouldn't think. They're going to be on a commercial flight, and I just don't feel like that's, and that's not in the best interest of the student athlete. But, of course, money is the driver here, and with the revenue sports of primarily football, secondary basketball, they just, I guess they just assume that those other things, those are kind of the, what's the word I'm looking for? The unintended consequences, I guess. So anyway, I'm sure, we'll be talking about this until those 4 Pac-12 teams find a home. And then, that could cause a ripple effect among the G5, depending on what happens with those 4 Pac-12 teams. On a more positive note, Purdue has announced that they will issue NFL weekly style NFL injury reports. They will be doing that on Thursdays during the season. We reported earlier that LSU was doing that. And I think that's a great thing. That's a great thing for, bettors. It's a great thing for college fantasy football players, DFF players. That's great information to have, because currently the information is non-existent. You usually don't find out a player's not playing until 2 or 3 minutes into the game, and then the announcer will say, "Oh, so and so is not playing today, and he's hurt, or whatever the case may be." And at that point, it's too late to get him out of your college lineups or your DFS lineups, or but that's clearly too late to make a bet or to change a bet or any of those things, or to hedge a bet. So that's good news. Following along those same lines, a little bit later in the week, the Big Ten is going to now require all their conference football programs to release a player availability report 2 hours before each conference game kickoff. So that only applies to the Big Ten conference games, but still, it's a step in the right direction, a positive step, and hopefully more conferences will follow suit. I think, especially once we get to once the dust settles on this new Power 5, whether it's Power 4, Power 3, whatever it may be, I think that's going to become at least the norm for those conferences to do, just from a normal day-to-day how to do business perspective. On to some player news. LSU defensive tackle Mason Smith, who's someone that mostly is, if you're in a defensive tackle required league, I have no doubt he is likely rostered in your leagues, as he has, not only does he have some college production, he also has some NFL potential as well. But he's going to be suspended for the first game against Florida State this coming week. So make sure you get him out of your lineups. Don't start him. He was suspended for something that happened, I think it's in 2021, but now it's legal. He and Kayshon Boutte, I think, were signing autographs or something along those lines and getting money. So basically NIL. But that was before NIL was legal. And so obviously, Boutte's in the NFL, so, they can't really do much to him. But Mason Smith is going to serve a 1-game suspension for that infraction. I don't know. It just kind of seems like the NCAA grasping at straws here, where you're trying to, enforce something now that's legal. But, it was illegal when he did it. So, I get that point. So anyway, he will serve that 1-game suspension against Florida State. There was rumors that LSU was trying to schedule, because of that, LSU was trying to schedule a week 0 game so that he could serve that suspension in that game and not miss the Florida State game, which is, I don't know, I find that very interesting that they would go to that trouble just for one player, but nonetheless. Some more player news. Defensive end Corey Foreman from USC, who I'm pretty sure was like one of the number one rated, I think it was the number one rated defensive end, may have been the number one recruit in the class at the time overall. So he was third on the depth chart that USC released for their game yesterday against San Jose State. And he did not play in the game against San Jose State. At this point, if I'm rostering Corey Foreman, I don't know if he's even worth holding on to anymore. He's kind of been a disappointment, throughout his career at USC. There doesn't appear to be any signs that that's going to change. It sucks because you probably spent a lot of draft capital or auction dollars to get Corey Foreman because of how he was rated coming out of high school. But I guess if you have the roster room, you can hang on to him and see what happens. But if you're fighting for roster spots, he's someone I'm going to be I'd be looking at letting go, just simply that it looks like you've probably held on too long already as it is, and should have sold him in year 1. That's going to do it for our news and notes today. Before we get into our main topic, I just want to thank our sponsors. Thank Trophy Smack. Trophy Smack provides the trophies, the rings for our listener leagues for Devy IDP Grind, as well as the IDP Nation listener leagues. You can see the rings here. This is one of the rings. They come in a nice box. They're very nice rings. They're pretty heavy. They look pretty cool. I've never actually worn mine out anywhere, but it's kind of a cool thing to have. I'd rather have it than a trophy. They certainly offer other things as well. They have belts, which are really cool. They also sell mounts to mount the belts on a wall. You know, they're wrestling, look like wrestling championship belts for your fantasy football leagues. Those are super cool. They have all kinds of things over there. They have things for the losers. I suck at fantasy football stuff. So kind of any kind of trophy needs that you need for your fantasy football league. Trophy Smack is kind of the leader in that area, and certainly look at them and support them as they support us in our endeavors here. Next is MFL. MFL gives us free leagues for our IDP Nation and Devy IDP Grind League, so we thank them for that. MFL, when it comes to IDP, both for NFL, they're the leaders. Not only just IDP, but just customization in general. There's not much you can't do in an MFL league, from auctions to customized scoring for specific positions, even offering the specific positions. Like some format, a lot of fantasy football league management software does not offer. You can't, they offer generic D line or generic DB, so you can't, separate defensive ends and defensive tackles or cornerbacks and safeties. And you certainly can't score them differently based on those positions. MFL offers all that. So, if you're serious about IDP, MFL is the place to play that. MFL also offers multiple copy leagues. To my knowledge, they're one of the few that offer that. So if you're in a multi-copy league, MFL is, if you want to start one, MFL is the place to do that. And we thank them for their sponsor. And lastly, Action 24/7 betting site. It's a Tennessee site. As Hollywood says, it's by Tennesseans for Tennesseans. They offer all betting on pretty much anything you could think of. You name it: cricket, darts, football, NFL, basketball, racing, golf. You think about it. If you think you can bet on it, they probably offer it. So please. If betting's allowed in your state and Action 24/7 is allowed is one of the approved sites, then certainly look them up and support them and hopefully win some money. All right, now on to our 5-star topic this week, the conference preview series. We're kind of wrapping these up today and tomorrow with the FBS Independence of the G5. Today we'll be covering the FBS Independence, the American Athletic Conference, or AAC, and Conference USA, or CUSA. So we'll start things off with a team that played yesterday, and that's the Massachusetts Minutemen. They defeated New Mexico State yesterday, 41-30. I saw like the very, very end of that game. I did not catch a whole lot of it. I gotta say, I'm impressed. I was impressed by UMass, just from, they looked way better than they have looked in a long time, in my opinion. What little bit I did see there in the fourth quarter, and just looking at the score and the stats and all that, I didn't expect UMass to even win the game, much less, kind of win it in I feel like fairly convincing fashion. But from an IDP perspective, there was one player that I think stood out a little bit. He's not someone I'm rostering, but he is someone that maybe I'm going to keep on a watch list and kind of pay attention to him, as the next couple weeks go on. And that's safety Tyler Rudolph. So in yesterday's game, he had 8 total tackles, 6 were solo tackles. He had 1 sack and a 1 tackle for loss. He was the leading tackler for UMass yesterday. Rudolph is a transfer from Penn State. He transferred 2 seasons ago. So this is his second season here at UMass. He was a 4-star recruit when he went to Penn State. Last season, in his first full season with UMass, he had 62 total tackles, 37 solo, 25 assisted, 2 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery, 2 interceptions, and 5 pass breakups. So, those aren't great numbers, in terms of fantasy production. And so, while he was the leading tackler yesterday, he's definitely someone that that I'm going to keep on a kind of on a radar more or less, rather than going and trying to add him immediately. Just because last season it wasn't he wasn't. He had last season. Looking at last season's stats, he had 3 games with 8 or more tackles. He had a game with 8, 1 game with 10, and 1 game with 9 tackles. And then after that, it was just kind of 7 tackles, 2 tackles, 5 tackles, 3 tackles, 5 tackles, 3 tackles, 3 tackles, 2 tackles, 5 tackles. It does look like he kind of came on more so towards the end of the season with the tackle numbers, but he was very inconsistent. He'd get you 10 tackles and then 1 week and then 2 tackles the next, and that's not consistent enough for me and what I would be looking for in a IDP league as far as CFF scoring. But definitely someone to kind of keep on your watch list. All right, moving on to Notre Dame. Notre Dame also played yesterday. They played Navy. That I watched the majority of that game, and that really wasn't much of a game. Notre Dame just kind of dominated Navy throughout the game. The 2 things, or the one thing I was most interested in seeing, was how defensive lineman or edge Javante Jean-Baptiste looked for Notre Dame. He was someone that I was kind of keeping an eye on. He transferred over from Ohio State. He wasn't going to be a starter there. Transferred to Notre Dame. He started for Notre Dame, and he looked good yesterday. He had 4 total tackles, 2 solos, 1 TFL, and he also, he didn't have a sack, but he was in that backfield quite a bit. So he's someone that I would be comfortable, I think, rostering if you need defensive end or defensive line edge help in your CFF IDP league. Again, he was a transfer from Ohio State, and he's starting for the Notre Dame. The other players that I'm going to talk about were the 3 linebackers that started yesterday. So we'll start first with JD Bertrand. And Bertrand 2 years ago was kind of a stud from a he came on late in the year in 21, and in 21 he had over 100 tackles in 2021. He was kind of their star tackle. Those numbers dipped last year to 82. Still not terrible, but kind of getting on that fringe of, is he startable in an IDP league, I feel, for a linebacker. And from a statistical standpoint, yesterday was not great for him. I'm not overly concerned about him if you're in a C2C league. I do think he probably has, some possible NFL potential, but I just don't know. I just feel like the defense and the linebacking core from Notre Dame is so talented that he might not even get to 82 tackles again. And so he only had 3 tackles yesterday. All 3 of those were solos, and his the other 2 starting linebackers from a production standpoint definitely outproduced JD Bertrand, and that was Jack Kaiser and Maurice Luafau. Jack Kaiser led Notre Dame yesterday and tackles with 8 total tackles. He had 6 solo. Jack Kaiser last season had 59 total tackles, 28 solos, 31 assisted, 2.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. Now, Kaiser and Luafau, they kind of play more of the outside linebacker role. I wouldn't call them edges. They're kind of true outside linebackers, whereas Bertrand kind of plays that more middle role. But in their defensive scheme, for whatever reason, at least yesterday anyway, and it could be just a function of Navy, right? The Navy offense and that triple option offense. It could just strictly be more a function of that offense and why the stats played out the way they did with the linebackers and their assignments for gaps, etc., playing that offense. But Kaiser and Luafau definitely looked like the linebackers to own yesterday. So I think that's a situation to kind of monitor going forward. Luafau had 7 total tackles yesterday, 4 solos. Last season, he had 51 total tackles, 22 solo, 29 assisted, half a sack, one fumble recovery, and an interception, as well as one pass defense. Luafau has great size, 6'2", 235. Kaiser, I would say the same thing. He's 6'1", 223, so he's a little shorter, a little smaller. But as far as NFL potential, maybe I would rank them Luafau, Bertrand, Kaiser. I haven't really seen a whole lot of either three show up in mock drafts, but it's still a little early. So kind of, it's a situation to kind of pay attention to as the season goes on with those Notre Dame linebacking core to kind of see how the tackles are shaking out on a week-to-week basis. So you can make your decisions with your rosters and your starters there. Or, because like I said, maybe yesterday was just kind of a function of the offense they were playing, which I don't know if they play another triple option team the rest of the year. So, with that kind of, with that triple option offense, it certainly could play a part in, the defensive stats for the IDPs yesterday. The last team I want to talk about for the FB Independents is Connecticut, and the guy I want to mention here, if he is available in any of your leagues, I'd be snatching this man up immediately. He should not be a free agent. If you're in a league that's counting tackles, this guy has been a tackle machine while he's been at Connecticut, and that's linebacker Jackson Mitchell. So he returns for his final season. Last year, he led the team and was one of the top tacklers in college football with 140 total tackles. I expect him to do that again. 100 plus tackles. He had 113 tackles in 21 and 65 tackles in 2019. There's not a whole lot to say, but the man, he's, for a college football player, you'd be hard pressed to find more production from another player other than Jackson Mitchell. So if he's available in your leagues and your league is counting tackles, he absolutely needs to be rostered. All right, moving on to Conference USA. I'm sorry, American Athletic Conference. So this conference had quite a lot of change, and more change to come, possibly with SMU leaving. But they lost UCF, Cincinnati, Houston to the Big 12. They brought in Charlotte, Florida Atlantic, North Texas, Rice, and UAB from the Conference USA. So it's like half the conference has kind of been replaced. And to be honest with you, most of the teams, if not all these teams, I think all of them, they actually all came from Conference USA at one point. They came over to the American Athletic at different points, but at one point, I'm pretty sure every single one of these teams was in Conference USA. And so the first team I want to talk about here is the Memphis Tigers, and that's defensive end Jalen Allen. He's probably the only player that I would consider, rostering right now from Memphis. He had 58 total tackles last year, 5 sacks. Of those tackles, 28 were solo, 30 assists. He had 1 pass defense and 1 interception, as well as 1 fumble recovery last year, and that's just good, solid production for a defensive lineman. So he's getting you a decent amount of sacks and a decent amount of tackles. I doubt he has any NFL potential, but from a college production standpoint, Jalen Allen is definitely someone I feel like they should be rostered, because he's going to, he kind of gives you, he might not give you the super big weeks, but he's going to give you the consistency with those tackle numbers on a week-to-week basis. Next up is a gentleman that did play yesterday in the Notre Dame Navy game. This guy is probably more of a watch list kind of guy and see how it shakes out throughout the season. And that's Will Harbor, a linebacker, senior linebacker, 6'1", 230. Yesterday, he was Navy's leading tackler, 8 total tackles, all of them solo tackles. Last season, he only had 30 total tackles. He had 14 solos, 16 assists, and 1.5 sack. So again, he's a watch list guy. He's not someone that you should be rushing out, in my opinion, to roster in a league right away. You just kind of want to see how those how is he going to lead the is he going to start keep leading tackles every week, and he's going to take that jump up to the next level. Like I said, he only had 30 total tackles last year, and he got almost a third of those in the first game, which is good, right? That's positive. But he's not someone that I feel like is a priority ad. He's more of a watch list kind of guy to see how Navy defense plays out throughout the year. Next up, these next two guys are both players that absolutely should be rostered in pretty much any league, a college league or a C2C league. And the first guy I want to mention is an edge. He's an edge, and I think he has defensive end and linebacker eligibility in Fantrax, and that's Leighton Jordan. He had 53 total tackles last season, 9 sacks. Of those 53 tackles, 37 solos, 16 assists, 3 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery, as well as 2 interceptions. And he returned both of those interceptions for touchdowns, which is pretty awesome. He had 1 pass defense. Absolutely, because of that defensive end eligibility, he absolutely should be rostered in a league, unless your league's going in and manually changing him to like a linebacker only, for instance. But he's truly an edge kind of guy, and so that again, he gets that defensive end linebacker eligibility, and I'm probably not as interested in him as a linebacker if he only has linebacker eligibility, just because his tackle numbers, while they're great for a defensive lineman, they're not so great for a linebacker. But he does have, those 9 sacks. Those 9 sacks are great. So I can understand, like, if you have him on a roster and starting him at a linebacker as well. But his value is certainly on that along a defensive line or a defensive end if you can start him there in your leagues. The next is linebacker Jordan McGee. Jordan McGee is someone I think has some NFL potential. I've seen him in some mock drafts. He was the leading tackler last season for Temple. He's a middle linebacker, strictly linebacker only. He had 86 total tackles, 50 solo, 36 assists, 4.5 sacks, 3 pass defenses, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. He should 100% be rostered in a C2C league, because he's going to give you college production, has that NFL potential as well. It wouldn't shock me if he gets kind of closer to that 100 tackle range in this coming season for Temple. So, both Jordan and McGee are two guys that should definitely be rostered in your C2C CFF leagues. Next up is Tulane, and we have 2 guys here that I wanted to mention. The first guy I'll talk about is a transfer. So Tulane lost quite a bit of their tackle production from last season. Dorian Williams, Nick Anderson. Dorian Williams, got drafted by Buffalo. Nick Anderson graduated, and they were the 2 leading tacklers, both with over 100 tackles. In comes Tyler Grubbs. He transferred in from Louisiana Tech. He has played great for Louisiana Tech over the course of the last several years, and he's someone I feel like that can step into that starting linebacker role for the Green Wave there, and get you 100 plus tackles in a game, in the season. Tyler Grubbs is someone that we have talked about on numerous occasions on this podcast. I feel like he's probably rostered in your leagues, but if he's not, definitely go out and look at him. I was trying to find his stats from last season. It looks like MFL has kind of already moved him over to Tulane. I'm sorry. ESPN. Let's try Sports Reference real quick. But Grubbs is, he should be rostered 100% in your leagues if he isn't already. Let's see, Tyler Grubbs. So he last season he had 96 total tackles. I'm sorry, 2020 he had 96 total tackles. 2021 he had 97 total tackles, and then last season, he was injured, only played 5 games, but in those 5 games he had 48 tackles. So he was, if he had played the whole season, he was on pace again for getting close to that 100 mark. And so I don't see that being a problem for him, provided he can stay healthy with Tulane. I expect him to kind of step right into that role vacated by Dorian Williams there and lead that defense from a middle linebacker perspective. The next guy we want to talk about is defensive end Darius Hodges. Let's get those stats here. All right, Darius Hodges last season had 37 total tackles, 26 solo, 11 assists, 5 sacks. Again, not too flashy of a number, but he's kind of steady. And so if you're looking for that steady college production, very unlikely Hodges or even Grubbs has much NFL potential. But if you need college production, 37 tackles and 5 sacks, that's pretty consistent, steady production from a defensive end. Again, so that's what you're looking for, what you need on your team. Darius Hodges is someone I would be looking to roster. The last guy that I wanted to talk about here is UTSA, and that's safety Rashad Wisdom. Last season, he was hurt for a good bit of the season. Didn't really play. I don't even know if he played at all last year. I'm trying to find his stats. Doesn't look like it. Yeah, it doesn't look like he played at all last year, but I know the year before he was one of their leading tacklers. So take that back. He played 6 games last season with 27 total tackles. The year before, 2021, he played all the games, had 87 total tackles. 2020, 12 games, 95 tackles. In his freshman season, 19, he had 44 tackles. So, if he's healthy and he is slated to start for UTSA again this year, he's definitely someone that, if you need defensive back help, maybe you're going to roster and take a chance on him and hope that he's healthy and can get back to that 95 or 87 tackle mark for UTSA. Moving on to Conference USA. So the first team we want to talk about is a team that played yesterday, and that's Florida International. I watched the very, very end of that game. Offensively, there wasn't a whole lot to be impressed by FIU. They had something like 6 passing yards, I think, total. Just not a very impressive game from that standpoint. They ended up losing at the very end. They were winning the game, for most of the game. They lost in the last few minutes there. But, it wasn't an overly exciting game. I expected more from the Louisiana Tech offense, especially against Florida International. They're probably one of, if not the worst teams in FBS. And from a statistical standpoint, Louisiana Tech looked, okay. But they, from a scoring standpoint, they just, didn't get a whole lot done there. The game, I think, was 17-16 up until literally the very end of the game. And so, I would have expected a lot more from the Louisiana Tech offense, at least from a scoring perspective, going up against that Florida International defense. But nonetheless, linebacker Donovan Manuel led the way yesterday with 15 total tackles, 8 solos, 1 TFLs. And I really don't know what to make of it in terms of what to tell you to do with him. If you need linebacker help, I think you could do a lot worse. He did have 97 total tackles last year, which is great. Florida International offensively looks bad. And so, Looks like Manuel's going to be the man in terms of, being on the field and leading them in tackles. So if you need some linebacker help, Donovan Manuel is someone to be looking at. We've talked about this numerous times that sometimes it's not about talent. Sometimes it's oftentimes about opportunity, right? And that Florida International offense did not look good at all yesterday. And if they can't move the ball and be effective, that means the defense is going to be on the field a lot. And that means more tackle opportunities. So, if you're in need of a linebacker who's strictly a college production guy, Donovan Manuel is someone you should be going and looking at and rostering in your leagues. Next, I want to talk about Louisiana Tech, the other side of that coin. And the guy I want to mention here is Brevin Randall. He looks like he's stepping into that role that's vacated by Tyler Grubbs. He led Louisiana Tech in tackles yesterday with 9 total tackles. Now, the negative of that is only 2 of those were solo, 7 of them were assists. And from a historical perspective, he has not done much. And so he's probably more of a kind of a watch list, wait and see kind of guy. 2022, he had 10 total tackles, 21-4. 2020, his highest season of 26. But it does appear perhaps he is stepping into that role for Tyler Grubbs. Now, the thing I will say about yesterday's game is, as I mentioned, Florida National is not moving the ball through the air. They had 6 total passing yards. It was on the ground. And so obviously that's going to bode well for, defense and tackles, specifically, linebackers. So again, I throw a little caution on those 9 tackles there and say, hey, he's probably someone that I'm going to more like kind of take a wait and see watch list approach with to see how he does moving forward. Next up is the Sam Houston Bearcats. They are brand new to the FBS. They are moving up to Conference USA. And not too long ago, they won an FCS national championship. Now, last season, they took a very unique approach to teams that move up, and they a lot of their star players, they played the 4 games and then sat out the rest of the year. That way, they preserved their final year of eligibility for this move up to FBS, and that's a very very interesting approach. And it was quite a bit of their top-notch star players that did this. So the first guy I want to talk about is Edge. You guys, if you're a listener to our podcast, you should be very familiar with him. He's someone that we interviewed last season from Sam Houston State. And that's Markel Perry. Like I said, he played his 4 games last season. Last season, he ended up with 8 total tackles, 4 solos, 4 assists. But he played his games and then preserved his year of eligibility. But he's someone that you should definitely maybe consider. He was an FCS All-American. A good producer for Sam Houston State on that FCS level, and I expect him to be a leader on the offense for Sam Houston State. The next guy, very similar. Again, we interviewed him last season, and that's Trevor Williams. If kind of similar in that he trying to pull up his stats here. He last season had 27 total tackles, 11 assists. 11 solos, 16 assists, 1 forced fumble. He's probably in line to be their leading tackler for Sam Houston State. Again, he sat out. When I say he redshirted last year to preserve that year of eligibility, and both of these guys are expected to lead that Sam Houston defense. As they move into Conference USA, they're probably guys. I mean, I would have zero doubt that they're not rostered. But hey, they're names you should know and possibly pay attention to kind of see if they're able to produce and make that transition to the FBS. Next up is the UTEP Miners, who did play yesterday. I believe they lost to Jacksonville State. A close game. I saw very, very little of that game yesterday. Neither team looked super impressive to me. What little I did see, but first game. So yeah, the UTEP lost to Jacksonville State 17-14. And the first guy I'm going to talk about should 100% be rostered, and any league that counts tackles, whether that's CFF or C2C. Again, I don't think he has any NFL potential, but you'd be hard pressed to find a higher CFF production guy, and that's linebacker Tyrese Knight. He led the UTEP team yesterday with 13 total tackles, 7 of those solos, 6 assists. Last season, 2022, he had 97 total tackles, 50 solos, 47 assists, 1 sack, 1 interception, 5 passes defended. And then in 2021, he broke that 100 mark with 101 total tackles, 58 solo, 43 assists, 2 sacks, 1 interception. And then his freshman season in 2020, he had 54 total tackles. So again, if he's not rostered in your league, and your league's counting tackles, absolutely he should be rostered. He's one of the top tackle guys in college football today. Next up is a defensive end who I think has probably bounced on and off rosters quite a bit, just because he's not been what I would say like super consistent. He's not he doesn't last season I would say was a down season for him. And that's praise. I'm a Wahule, a defensive end. He did have a nice start off yesterday. He had 4 total tackles, 3 solo, 1 assist, and a sack. That's a good start for him. So maybe he can return to his 21 and 2020 form. Last season, he had 23 total tackles, but only 2 sacks. 21, he had 38 tackles, 5.5 sacks. And 2020, he had 19 tackles and 7 sacks. And so, while the tackle production kind of seems, in that 30 to 20 range, the sack production is what was lacking last year with only 2 sacks. So if people rostered him for his 2 previous years, they likely dropped him last season just because the production wasn't there. But he's off to a good start. Like I said, 4 total tackles and a sack yesterday. And so, again, if you need defensive end help, maybe you pick him up or put him on your watch list and see how he looks as the next couple games here. But he very well could be rostered from the 2021 and his 2020 season. But someone could have got frustrated last season and dropped him because of that. So check those waiver wires. The last player that I want to talk about today comes from Western Kentucky. And this guy should be rostered in your leagues if they are counting stats. And this guy is an edge. So he has defensive line as well as linebacker eligibility. And that is Jock Evans. And he 100% should be rostered. Whether you can play him at linebacker or defensive end doesn't matter to me, because last season he was our leading tackler, 107 tackles. To go with that, he had 9 sacks. So 107 tackles, 9 sacks, 5 pass defenses, 2 fumble recoveries, and a fumble return for a touchdown. That's phenomenal production. Whether he's that's amazing production if you can play him at on the defensive line, and that's really good production if he's a linebacker, because of the 100 tackles and the 9 sacks. So he 100% should be rostered in your leagues. If not, go scoop him up. I expect Western Kentucky to kind of put their offense to be really effective once again, which puts pressure on the opposing offense, which allows Evans to kind of pin his ears back and rush the other team because they're playing from behind or they're having to keep up with Western Kentucky's scoring. It's all a recipe for him to possibly be able to repeat those sack numbers. So Jock Evans, again, roster him if he's not rostered in your leagues. And that's going to do it for today, folks. So I will be back sometime tomorrow during the day with our final conference preview. And that will be the Mid-America Conference, the MAC, Mountain West Conference, and the Sun Belt Conference. So, I enjoyed it. Hope you guys got some useful information today. And I will see you guys again tomorrow with our final conference preview series. And then, starting next week, we'll be into the swing of things with college football kind of starting full force. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and I will see you tomorrow.